Good morning. Thank you for joining us. We'll get started in about 1 minute. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar on supporting multilingual learners' socio-emotional health and development. My name is Carolyn Corlott, and I'm the Director of Dual Language Learner Programs for Early Edge California. We're very excited to partner with Peach to be able to provide these relevant tools and resources for you on supporting socio-emotional health and development as part of the Multilingual Learning Toolkit. And today is the third and final session of our 3-part webinar series for higher education faculty members and teacher educators. And as you'll see, this will be an interactive webinar with prompts for you to engage via chat and a few other collaborative tools. And Early Edge will be sending a follow-up email with a certificate of attendance, as well as links to the recording and other materials so that you can access them after the webinar. And please also feel free to share these resources with your colleagues as well. And now I would like to introduce you to our presenters today. We have with us Ana Arambula-Gonzalez, Child Development Coordinator and Instructor at Madera Community College. And also joining us through a pre-recorded video is Dr. Jennifer Paris, Early Childhood Education Chair at the College of the Canyons. And Ana, I will now turn it over to you.
Thank you, Carolyn, for the nice introduction, and thank you all for being here with us today. What an honor and great opportunity to share with you such important information and resources to improve our practices in preparing our wonderful students and future educators. Unfortunately, as Carolyn mentioned, Jennifer is not able to join us live, but she will be here with us via a recording. During our time together this morning, Jennifer and I will be sharing what research says about multilingual learners' social emotional health and development. And together we'll identify strategies educators can use to support children's social emotional health and development to create an environment that supports socialization and emotional regulation. And lastly, examples of assignments that you can incorporate into your courses. Now, before we dive into today's session, I would like to start us off by engaging in an activity using Jamboard. You can scan the QR code on the screen or log on using the link that Trish put in the chat. So once you have that on your screen, I would like for you to respond to the first question, which is, why is social emotional health and development important to early learning? So we'll give you a couple seconds to try to get the Jamboard up. And then Trish will be showing us as you put in your responses in the Jamboard. So hopefully everyone had an opportunity to log on to the Jamboard and type in, or you can write in using the text box, why is social emotional health and development important to early learning? Why do you think that is? And if it's easier for you to use the chat, feel free to also use the chat, because I see that we don't have any responses yet. So hopefully everyone is able to access the Jamboard. If not, feel free to use the chat box, I'm sorry. So why is social emotional health and development important to early learning? We know that children's social emotional development plays a big factor in the way that they engage with other adults and other children. So that is why social emotional health is important in early learning. But there are many, many more reasons. And as we go on through our time together this morning, feel free to put them in there. And I see that there are some Q&As in the chat. So it looks like the Jamboard is read only. I'm sorry. Let's see. Okay, so let's go to Plan B. And it says the chat is disabled. Can we enable the chat so that we are able to have our participants? I'm sorry that it's only view only. That is so strange. Thank you for using the chat. Okay, it's good now, someone said. So learning happens with relationships. So let's move on to our second question. And as we go on together this morning, let's use the chat instead, since we were having those technical difficulties with Jamboard. So the second question is, what are some examples of social emotional health and development that you can incorporate in classrooms? Or that you can share with those students in your classroom, in your courses. So I see here, social emotional development is important as a foundation for all other developments. It's more important than any other domain. The labeling of emotions, modeling empathy, engaging in activities, using scripted stories to teach about emotions. Reflective listening is a great social emotional tool I love to share with my students. Relationship building, acknowledge emotions. That's extremely important, and acknowledging them, but also giving children those words to label their emotions as well. Regular check-ins. Thank you so much for sharing. And as we move on together this morning, feel free to continue typing in the chat. So thank you for sharing. Now let's move on to why social emotional health and development is important. According to a research paper titled Family Engagement in Early Childhood Programs Serving Families of Dual Language Learners from California's Best Practices for Young Dual Language Learners, stated that social emotional is critical for all young learners, particularly for multilingual learners. Children who speak a language other than English may need additional support from teachers to make sure that they feel comfortable and included in the classroom, and to ensure that they have meaningful access to all learning opportunities. Engaging with children and families in a friendly and accepting way helps foster self-confidence, family pride, and conveys a message of caring and respect for the child and the family. Let's continue with more research. This is research on the affective filter. I'm curious, have you heard about the affective filter before? Using the chat, please type yes or no. No? Yes? So we have some no's, a few yes. Awesome. Okay, so the research on the affective filter tells us that when the affective filter shuts down, the level of cortisol in the brain is high, which means that it interferes with learning. The child can't focus when in this state, and therefore little to no language learning can take place. For children and adults to learn, they must be at ease. If children are a different person at home than they are at school, or there is something in the environment that does not reflect who they are, then they start to pick up on cues and try to make sense of what is acceptable and what is not. At the end of the day, everyone wants to be accepted and feel good about themselves. A sense of belonging is a very basic human concept. Let's move on to more information on the affective filter. The affective filter influences an individual's emotional state to where it either promotes or hinders learning a new language or any skill. As we prepare our future educators, it's important that they think about how to organize their curriculum in a way that is responsive to our super diverse classrooms, with the goal of all children having full and effective access to the curriculum. Most importantly, they must understand the significant role the affective filter plays in children's language learning experiences. When children have high levels of stress, the affective filter shuts down and the holes in these screens get smaller, making it difficult for any information to get in, which interferes with language learning, those social emotional skills and development that are extremely important. And when there are low levels of stress, the affective filter opens up and those holes in the screen get larger and larger, making it easier for information to get in, which facilitates language learning. We want all children to have low levels of stress because we don't want children to feel confused, unmotivated to learn, disconnected from their family, invisible, rejected, unappreciated, misunderstood, and lost. These feelings shut down the affective filter and will interfere with a child's social emotional health and development. Using the family language and culture interview tool that Giselle introduced in our first webinar will be essential to better support the spoken languages and cultures of the children. Educators must take the time to learn more about the children in their care and their families to ensure that all cultures and languages are respected and welcome. Let's move on to strategies that can be implemented to ensure that no child feels that they are not valued and appreciated. Multilingual learners face several difficult situations, such as moving to a new country, trying to fit into a new school, and learning a different language. The following strategies support multilingual learners' social and emotional health. Let's begin with the first strategy, providing many opportunities for practicing social interactions and relationship skills. These are those planned and spontaneous activities. This is critical for children. Those are those intentionally planned activities that educators have planned for and have on their lesson plans for the day. But it is also those activities and moments that happen spontaneously as children engage in play with other children and adults. Some multilingual children may need additional supports with classroom transitions, since they may not be able yet to understand enough English to follow directions. A daily visual schedule is essential for all children, especially multilingual learners. Having a daily schedule with pictures, photos, or graphics, as well as words to describe each activity will help children know what to expect for the day. For example, when educators create a daily schedule, having pictures of the children in the actual classroom should be included in the schedule. It is best also to keep the routine as similar as possible daily. Visual schedules are an important tool in reducing anxiety in children while teaching flexibility. Imagine this scenario. It is the first day of school for a preschool child who does not speak English and whose home language is Vietnamese. None of his educators speak his language. How could the educator use the visual schedule to support this student? Using the chat, share your ideas on how the educator can support this student using a visual schedule. So let's see, using the chat. So what are some ways that an educator who doesn't speak the language of the child use the daily schedule? Thank you, Trish, for putting it in the chat. Pictures, picture icons, photographs of children in the classroom with objects in the classroom. The teacher can point to the pictures, more pictures, images, gestures, modeling, realia. All of these are great strategies that any educator can use to support a child, especially when we don't speak their home language. because it's impossible for us to know what languages are going to be coming into our classroom, but knowing what strategies are available to us and that we can use is essential. And I see here using child's keywords in their language. Thank you so much for participating. Now, displaying labels and signs in the learning environment is an important part of creating a print-rich environment. These labels offer children opportunities to use printed language in ways that are real and meaningful, especially for multilingual learners. Educators need to be selective about items they will be labeling, and also keep in mind that the classroom labeling is not intended for decorative purposes. Instead, this strategy supports all children's oral language development and social emotional health, including that of multilingual learners. Labeling is a resource for the adults to support children's languages. Giving each language a color and keeping it consistent throughout the environment is also important to keep in mind. Now, when identifying a specific color to represent each language, it is important that educators share that color with families. Doing so will allow them to learn from the families if that selected color has a negative meaning in their culture. For instance, in some cultures, white represents innocence, but in others, it can represent death. Red is the most powerful of all colors in Indian culture and holds many important meanings. Among them are fear and fire, wealth and power. Labeling classroom objects allows multilingual children to better understand their immediate surroundings and to visually connect written language with the objects they represent. Classroom labels serve as a visual model for print for multilingual children. Labels in multiple languages also motivate children to read because they are in their home language. Children then feel valued and honored. They then feel comfortable using their home language, which gives them a sense of belonging. We want all children to grow up to be kind. Therefore, we must start early and have frequent conversations about diversity, fairness, and kindness with children. This is a must in all learning programs. Also, adding family photos, artifacts, tribal traditional materials that reflect home life, those cultural skills, values, beliefs, and community are examples of artifacts that can be added to the environment to support the cultures of the families and children's social emotional development. Educators can ask families if they have any artifacts that they can share to add to the environment. For example, it can be a doll, clothing, or a musical instrument. Including relevant artifacts in the classroom creates a sense of belonging, which can then help open that effective filter and support new learnings for multilingual children. Incorporating books and visuals that are anti-bias and reflecting children's personal experiences and community and cultural backgrounds is important. We want all our children to have access to books with illustrations that look like them. The use of books to teach children about diversity, fairness, and kindness allows the educator to provide examples of what fairness and kindness looks like in their very own classroom. We know that when we provide children with real life experiences, the learning is impactful, and those learning experiences stay with the children for a lifetime. Let's look at more strategies. We all, I'm sure, love a cozy area where we can go to, maybe to read a book or maybe simply take a break. The same is for children. It is important that the learning environment has cozy and welcoming areas for children to access throughout the day, especially for multilingual learners. Having spaces where they can go to look at their favorite book or a family book that has been created by the child's family will support the child when they are sad, or maybe they simply want some time to themselves, or maybe they want to dialogue with other children and adults in their home language. Lastly, comforting children in their home language is vital when they are in distress. You may be thinking, what if the educator does not speak the language? What then, right? So if this is the case, educators could ask the family to support them with the words and pronunciations of those words that can be used to comfort the child. This is something that, again, can be done prior to the child starting the program. And once again, the goal in supporting multilingual learners' social, emotional health and development is to value, support, and honor their home language. Now we're going to try a different activity using Mentimeter. We'll see if it works, great. If not, we'll use the chat box. So if you can scan this QR code or simply click on the link that Trish put in the chat, it's going to take you to this Mentimeter. And what I would like for you to do for this activity is think about how could we help shape children's sense of self and belonging using the strategies I just shared with you, or maybe you share some strategies that you have shared with students in your courses in the past. So let's see if it's, and like I said, okay, Luis, thank you. Luis said the link is working, so hopefully, okay, there they go. So create classroom books that contains pictures of each child and something about them, giving additional comfort, affection, and love, bringing in photos of family, make the student feel heard, valued, and appreciated, give them the opportunity to speak their mind, explore their surroundings, and find themselves within it. Visuals, family pictures. Awesome. These are all great strategies to support children's sense of self and belonging. And I see someone in the chat put, give them positive affirmations, allow them to share who they are. Absolutely. Empowering their ability to realize that they are valued. Yes. And that's what we want for all children. We want them to feel valued. And we want to give them those positive affirmations and allow them to share their feelings, their emotions, how they are feeling every day. They're different times of the day. For example, a child may be happy at drop off, but as the day progresses, they may not be so happy anymore. So giving them those vocabulary words so that they can identify and label their feelings. Thank you for sharing. So now, before I begin sharing some examples of assignments, and I would like for you, if you've joined us for our first webinar, our second webinar, you know that we have created a Padlet page where you can share your examples of assignments that you have done in your courses to support children's social, emotional health and development. Or maybe as I share some examples with you, and Jennifer, and you listen to Jennifer's examples of assignments, you can add an extension on how that assignment can also be used. And after the webinar, you can still add your ideas to the Padlet, so don't feel that you need to do it right away. You can always do that at the end of the webinar. And it is a great way for us to share with one another in this community of higher ed faculty, how we can continue to support each other in our courses. So I will now share examples of assignments that can be incorporated in your courses. The resources I will use for all of the assignment examples can be found on the Multilingual Learning Toolkit website. This checklist assignment can be used the same way if you're teaching online or in person using the same assignment format. This simple checklist helps teachers identify the diversity across a classroom of learners. Reflecting and gathering information about families and students' background helps build those relationships and trust, which a lot of you already mentioned in the chat and using the Mentimeter. An example of how this checklist can be used is to have students complete this checklist at the beginning of your course. Now, once the students have completed their checklist, ask them to respond to the following questions. What did I already know about the diverse experiences among my students? What do I need to find out? How and when can I get this information? When am I going to meet with families? And lastly, ask students to write a reflection on what they learned from completing this checklist and what they hope to do to learn more about the children and families in their classroom. I'm curious, have you used a similar checklist in your courses? If so, I would greatly appreciate it if you can share it with us in the Padlet so that we can see the different examples of checklists that you all may have used in your courses. This assignment here, again, can be used for online and in-person teaching using the same assignment format. Now, this article here introduces many different ideas and structures to help a teacher define group learning goals. This provides multilingual learners with opportunities to work with peers and build both content and social language skills. So an example of how this can be used is to, again, provide students with the link to the handout, ask students to read the handout, and after they have read that handout, ask them to list and describe 3 strategies they hope to implement in their classrooms to support children's social and emotional health that they learned about that they didn't know. Now, if a student is currently working in a classroom, ask them to take photos of themselves implementing 2 of the 3 strategies they listed. If a student is not working in the classroom, because we know that that is also the case at times, ask them to look for pictures of an educator on the internet demonstrating 2 of the 3 strategies they listed. You can also share the Multilingual Learning Toolkit website. There they can find many examples as well. Now, to make this assignment more engaging, let students know that they will be sharing those photos with the entire classroom during the next class session. By the end of this assignment, students will have presented and everyone will have a big repertoire of ideas to implement in their classrooms. Let's look at another assignment example. Now, this video here shares asset-based strategies for teachers to engage with families, develop the social emotional health of children, and set up an environment to support multilingual learners. This video focuses on preschool, but the content applies to all grade levels. The example in this video comes from a dual language classroom. And this assignment, again, can be used the same way if you're teaching online or in person, following the same format. So first, I would recommend that you watch the entire video during your class. Create a Jamboard and ask students to write a phrase that resonated with them from the video. This is a great way for students to participate and share anonymously. And from my experience with students, students tend to participate more frequently when they can share without their name being tied to their response. And the actual assignment is to have students respond to these questions. What was something they learned about from the video that they didn't know? Then what do they hope to implement in their classroom to ensure that all students and families are seen and validated? And lastly, what are they most excited about and can't wait to implement with their students? You may be wondering, what if a student is not in a classroom yet? They can still implement the assignment because the questions are worded in the future tense, so they can still participate and do a great job with this assignment. Now, this assignment here is an article that introduces many different ideas and structures to help a teacher define group learning roles. This provides multilingual learners with opportunities to work with peers and build both content and social language skills. The goal of this assignment is to allow children the opportunity to engage in conversation with other children. And an example of how this tool can be used is to provide students with the link, have them read the handout, and after they have read it, have them select one of the listed practices. There are several practices on this handout. After they have selected that specific practice, then they will create an activity with children that incorporates the strategies listed in that selected practice. If a student is not in a classroom, have those students create a lesson plan describing how they would implement the selected practice. For those students who implemented the activity and do have access to a classroom, then they will share how the activity went with the entire class during the following session. You can create, again, a Jamboard that can be used for students as others are presenting their activities, ask any questions, make any comments, or highlight some things that they did not know that another student presented to them during this activity. And by the end of the sharing, students will walk away with many ideas of activities to incorporate in their practice. As I mentioned at the beginning of our webinar, Jennifer is not able to join us live, but we have a video of her sharing some great examples of assignments that are available to you all. Let's watch the video.
I hope I'm actually able to join the webinar live with you, but in case that I couldn't, or if I had connectivity issues, I wanted to create a video so that I could share the assignments that I created for this webinar. So there are 2 assignments, and one is been converted into 2 formats, as an individual assignment, but then also as an in-class assignment that you could do with the whole class. And then I do want to note, there's also some OER content that I pulled out of the Introduction to Curriculum OER textbook, as well as the Child Growth and Development textbook. And those resources can be used freely. So you can use those. And then if you want to connect with the larger textbook that they're in and you don't already know where to find that, just let me know. So when you click on the assignments, you'll be able to view them. If you want to have your own copy, you have a couple of options. If you like Google Docs, you can just make a copy. But if you'd like to get it out of Google Docs and you want to put it into Word, you can download it as a Microsoft Word document, and then it's yours to use. You'll notice there's a footnote on all of the assignments that just gives credit to me and lets you know that I'm releasing this into the public domain, saying that you can do whatever you want with it, and you don't even have to say that it was my assignment, so you can delete that footnote. So let's look at the first assignment. This assignment is on using children's books to help support children's social and emotional development. I did add some language to make this specific, or more specific, to multilingual learner classrooms and classrooms in which there are multilingual learners. But I think that this would be applicable for all children. So it's not specific to that. So the students are going to choose a book. I've given a link to a list if they need a starting place, and then kind of ask them to think about what books that they would have access to that might be in the home languages of the children in their classroom. They want to read and evaluate the book, make sure they agree with how emotions are handled, what kind of modeling there is for social interactions, how does it represent children and different families and different communities and different cultural contexts, and how they might get translations of the children's book in languages for different families and children other than whatever language the book was published in. So then the third step is to create different plans to use the book with children to support their social and emotional development. So first talking about how is the book appropriate and what they're planning appropriate for the specific age. So if they're thinking about using the book with 4-year-olds, how do they know that this is an appropriate book and plan for 4-year-olds? Then looking at, and it really wants me to change that to emotional. How will you talk about feelings, and what emotion words will you use when you're reading the book with children and sharing this book with children and thinking about open-ended questions and terminology? And you may need to kind of delve into what are open-ended questions with your students if they haven't already had that content. And then the different planning possibilities include one to use with individual children or small groups, one to use with large groups or the whole class, different planned activities that would allow them to further explore the themes of the book. What about ways to incorporate the book into the physical environment? What kind of materials? How might they want to change the centers or learning areas of the classroom? And then lastly, how might they involve families? How could they share information with families? How could they offer them ideas to do things to do with their children? And then there's a rubric here. It's a starting place. I've never used this assignment. And so typically the first draft of a rubric needs some modifications and some tweaking once it's done. Plus, I also avoided putting points on this because everybody does different weights of points in their classes. So I would encourage you to go through the rubric, look at it, make sure that it makes sense to you to use if you're going to use the rubric. And then I would figure out what points you want for the different levels of performance. And then I don't have any created examples, but if you wanted to create examples, or if once the students have done them, if you want to kind of curate some examples of different levels of work, that is a really beneficial thing to provide students. Okay, let's look at the next assignment here. And this one is, I found a great video that was put out by Early Edu and Head Start, and it's on the Head Start website. So the video should remain stable and available. And it is just a short, I think about a 3.5 video on the fact that depending on our cultural context, our ideal emotions vary. So some families, some communities, some cultures value different things. And you as a teacher, so your students as teachers, will have their own ideal emotions that may or may not match the ideal emotions of the families and children that they work with. And so thinking about that and why that's really important. And so I've broken it down into 4 steps. This one is to do in class. So you might, and any of these could be modified. This is just one vision. So as a whole class, have them watch the video thinking about how does culture influence the way people vary in the value that they put in different emotions, and then thinking about how that applies to their lives. What ideal emotions do they have, and how has their culture influenced that? Then you could either do a whole class discussion, or you could do a small group, like breakout groups, and then a report back of some discussion questions about some of the things that they thought about as they were watching the video, why it's important for teachers to know, what they can do with that information, and what might happen if there's conflict between ideal emotions in a classroom. And then I created a couple of scenarios that they can kind of think about conflicting ideal emotions. So one kind of with that, the theme that was in the video, that some people idealize more active emotions than others. And so trying to figure out how to balance that and be true to yourself, but respectful to families. And then another one where it's more of that individual autonomy and sense of initiative versus that sense of community and connectedness and cooperation, and how a teacher might navigate those differences in a classroom. And then for the 4th step, you would have the students on their own create a scenario with a potential plan or ideas, possible solutions to how to work with that conflicting ideal emotions. And so the individual assignment is pretty much the same. There's a few minor modifications, but each of the steps is just completed by the student individually. And so it looks very similar. There is not a rubric for the whole class version, because you wouldn't grade the steps that they did as an entire class. So you could pull the end of this rubric if you wanted to for the whole class version. And then, as I mentioned in this folder here, there's just some content about curriculum for social and emotional development for preschool age children. That is based on the California Preschool Learning Foundations and the curriculum frameworks. And then there's some content about social emotional milestones and development in preschool aged, as well as friendship, peers, and peer groups in the school age children. So if you're kind of wanting more information about just what social emotional development looks like at the different ages that you might be working with in kind of this preschool through grade 3 age range, those might be helpful resources for you. And as I mentioned, you can reach out to me if you would like to see the whole book, either one of those books or any of the other OER books, and I can get you connected with those very easily. So Thank you for your time. And if I'm in the webinar and you've got any questions, just let me know.
Thank you, Jennifer, for sharing these wonderful assignment examples with us. And all of these assignments can be found on the Multilingual Learning Toolkit website. There's also a QR code that Jennifer created that you can scan and have access to them as well. But I do want you to know that they will be available to you as well. So we are going to watch a video. It's about 5 minutes. And as you watch this video, I invite you to think about the social, emotional health and development of the children in this video. I'm curious though, how many of you have watched this video before we begin to play it? If you can type using the chat in the chat, if you've watched this video before. Just yes or no. No? No, a lot of no's. Okay. Oh, some of you, yes. Okay. Well, I will tell you that every time I watch this video, I tell myself I'm not going to choke up, but it's impossible. So I'm just warning you, it is a great video and enjoy.
Guys, go ahead and find a station place.
¿Oíste? ¿Qué vas a jugar en la escuela?
Good morning, Diana.
Good morning, Miss Bethany. How are you?
Wonderful. Good morning, Valentina. How are you? Go ahead and put your step away, okay? How was your vacation? It's great to hear. I know she... Valentina, you don't need that right now. We're getting ready to learn. Please go put it on the shelf.
You think I don't need my gift, but I really do. Me siento perdida when you take it away.
Well, good morning, Angela. How are you?
Good.
Good. It's great to see you. Go ahead and put your backpack over there, okay? Here's an owl and a frog and a mouse.
Every morning, we bring our gift to school, the gift of our first language.
Why do you think the animals go to school at night? Zoe.
They're nocturnal. They don't go to sleep at night.
Okay. Valentina, what do you think? Valentina?
Every morning, you take our gift away. You think it will get in the way of our learning.
¿Y por qué? ¿Por qué son animales nocturnos?
Porque en la día están durmiendo y en la noche están despiertos. When you only look at what we can't do yet in English, you miss all the things you know and can do. Why won't you let us use our first language to make sense of all the new things you teach us?
Oh, Angela, don't take your shoes off. We don't take our shoes off here.
My culture and my language go together. They're part of who I am. Learning is easier when you accept all of me.
Okay, everybody, listen up. I want you to sort your bears into small and large, okay? Valentina. Small and large. Small and large. Pequeño, small. Grande, large.
Pequeño, small, grande, large.
So today we are going to greet our friends in their own special language. And guess what? When we come inside from the playground, we're going to take our shoes off, just like Angela does when she's at home. Okay? You ready to sing? Okay, let's start. Ready? Ming la ba, Angela. Angela is our
When you use words and songs in our first language and connect them with English, our learning takes off. Our families can help, and you can remind them they help us best when they keep talking, singing, and reading with us in our first language.
Yo tengo unos animales nocturnos.
You may think our English-speaking friends know more than we do, but our bilingual brains are amazing. They think in 2 languages and give us the power to express ourselves on both of them. It's not confusing at all.
large familiar fingers into a fan. Next, he leaned forward and kissed the center of her hand. Now, Chester didn't want his mother to be
Worried.
That's right, worried. And in Spanish, we say, preocupado.
My first language is my gift. It helps me grow and shine. I know you want that for me, for all of us, now and in the future.
Ginebug Bebe. Kafatafatatain. Har av van Lema. Aftahu hadiyati. Abre mi regalo and watch me change the world.
What a powerful video, right? I told you. It's very powerful. And this video reminds us of the work that we do every day in our courses and preparing our future educators. I see a lot of comments in the chat. You loved it. Some of us are crying, but they're happy tears. So I would like for you to type in the chat, what feelings came up as you watched this video? Did you feel sad, lost, helpless, or you probably wanted to help the little girl who was struggling with the counting bears? So what were some feelings that came up for you? Overwhelmed, bit frustrated. For some of you, brought some personal memories. Yes, missed opportunities. You felt connected as I was in her shoes. It made me feel like I need to do more. Kind of sad. I wanted to help the little girl feel welcomed in her own language. It made me want to help more, absolutely. And you all are already doing amazing work in preparing our future educators. Anxious. One of you, our participant put, I remember when I entered school and didn't know English. It's scary. And when we think about children's social emotional health and development, this is what we want for children. We want children to feel welcomed, valued, and appreciated. We don't want children to feel like these children at the beginning of this video who didn't feel connected. Sad at first, but then you felt happy. Thank you so much for participating and sharing. And it's for a lot of you, it really hit home. It brought back memories of your experience. And so really thinking about what we need to do to change that from our experience for our future children in our classrooms. So multilingual learners are eager to share their gift with others in their classroom community, but most importantly, they rely on this valuable gift to access the knowledge they have gained about the world and to continue to grow and learn as they develop their English. As educators, we must value this gift and bring it into the classroom. Integrating it in everything that we do is a foundation to make them more successful learners. Their gift is a gift to all of us. Their gift is a gift to our future. So thank you, everyone. So now I would like to share with you some great news. Some of you may already have heard it before, or some of you, this is new. But I do want to share with you that Dr. Carol Oliva Olsen and I are developing in partnership with Fresno City College a multilingual learner teaching certificate. This certificate is an initiative from the Institute for Racial Equity and Excellence, and it's called the Language Justice Initiative. This certificate focuses on the development of specialized competencies and pedagogical foundations and practices, curriculum, assessment, dual language settings, and program coordinated approaches for effective bilingualism, biliteracy development, content instruction, and equity and access for learning for multilingual learners from preschool to second grade. And for more information, you can log on to our website. Trish is going to put that in the chat just to learn more about it. And that is something that is taking place here in Fresno at the community college. And we hope to be able to share this with other community colleges as well. Thank you all for joining us this morning. I will now pass it on to Carolyn, who will be addressing any questions that you may have entered in the chat or if you have your hand raised.
Thank you so much, Anna, for that wonderful information. And wow, that video also made me cry. So powerful. So if you do, we do have a few minutes left, so please feel free to share any questions that you have in the chat or in the Q&A box. Unfortunately, we can't unmute individuals for asking questions live, so we'll need to include them in the chat since this is a webinar format. But as we're waiting for the questions to come in, I'll just remind you all that we'll be sharing a follow-up email after this webinar, where we'll be sharing the recording with all of you, and then we'll also be including all of the resources that Anna and Jennifer shared, as well as a certificate of attendance for you. And so we encourage you to share the recording with others and also the resources. So there's a question about whether we'll be repeating the first two classes anytime soon. So we won't be repeating them, but we did record them and they're available on the website, and Trish can include that website in the chat so that you can access them. So they're there, available, open access. So please also feel free to share those with your colleagues because they have great information and resources in there related to family engagement and also oral language development. And how we're very glad that you asked how you can receive notice of more awesome webinars like this one, because we're also planning additional webinars. We're in the process of thinking through with some partners about a new webinar series focused on, for administrators, really focused on bilingual programs and highlighting how can we expand bilingual programs in preschool and TK and offer pathways. So we'll be sharing more information about that as soon as possible. And Trish will also share the way that you can sign up to receive our updates for both Early Ed and also the Multilingual Learning Toolkit. And then we'll also be in September releasing new resources on the toolkit, and many of them are geared towards higher ed faculty, including lesson plans that you can use in your classes with your students, focused on the different instructional areas that we have on the website, and then some video guides and other great resources that we'll be adding. So Trish included how we can sign up for the mailing list. Any other questions that you have? Oh, do you have any suggestions specifically for trauma-based instruction for refugee students?
I think for that one, what I would recommend is using some of the strategies that I shared with you today and that some of you also shared in the chat. Those are strategies that support also with trauma, because with trauma is connected to social emotional development. And They go hand in hand. They don't work in silos. And so really thinking about those strategies and using them to support these students will be essential in helping them with the trauma as they begin to develop that trust and building those relationships with their educators.
Thank you, Anna. There was another question about the class at Fresno, wanting to know if it's going to be online.
Yes, so the goal is for them to be online because we want it to be available to all learners and students. And so that is the goal, to have it available online. I don't know for sure yet if they are all going to be asynchronous or they're going to be synchronous, where there will be some times where students will log on and join live sessions, or if it's going to be all self-paced. But click on our website link that Trish put in the chat, because that is where we will be putting announcements once that does become available. But also Early Edge is our partner in language justice and multilingual education initiative. And so we will also be sharing with them once that information becomes available. So if you joined the email list that Trish put in the chat, you will also get notifications on that through that platform as well. And you can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook, the Language Initiative, because there we will also be posting announcements.
Thank you, Anna. I see there's a question about whether the certificate has academic units. So unfortunately, this session does not. We've done that in the past for more in-depth professional development, like when we had our TK conference back in 2018. We had a collaboration with LMU where we were able to offer those units. So we can look into doing something similar in the future for future opportunities.
Yeah. And the actual certificate, the Multilingual Learner Teaching Certificate, that one does have units connected to
Okay,
it.
sorry, I thought they were asking about the certificate of attendance for the webinar.
Oh.
But they were probably asking about the course.
Yeah.
So that's great news, Anna.
Mm-hmm.
And then Trish also put into the chat a survey. If you could please take the last couple of minutes to complete that, we would love to learn more about how we can improve these sessions and make them even better and more relevant and useful to your work. So once again, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, Anna and Jennifer, for all these great resources and ideas. And we really hope that you'll incorporate all of these ideas and activities into your coursework with your students. And again, have a wonderful day.
Thank you.